Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day as well as end of week market recap. So what a week we had. It is Friday, February 3rd. First disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer there. Yes, so we had I think we had something for everyone this week. We had something for both macro and micro, and I would even put in other column as well besides macro and micro. What do I mean by that? Well, we had central bank meetings. Both the U.S. ECB were in the headlines. We had all kinds of earnings reports. We had the heavy hitters report. Some of the biggest weights in the indices report. Most of them in one night, which was last night after the close. And then you had things like weather balloons flying and Kathy Wood doing a victory lap yesterday. So that's where the that's where the other column comes in. So again, I think kind of something for everyone. Some of those things could be sediment tells. So very interesting. So where to start with all of those things? Well, let's recap. I think some of the economics that came out this morning. Those I think were also again something for everybody. The payrolls number, very shocking to see that much of a beat. We really just haven't had that the last few months. It's been, up, down a little bit, from consensus, from the estimate number. That private payrolls number and non-farm payrolls much larger than expected. Now, I don't dig into these numbers, so I don't know if there were some seasonal factors in play, but that wasn't the only data point that was a big jump today. So you could, sometimes you could say, okay, maybe there was some noise in a report, but you had the ISM services number come out. Again, this is a monthly number, but that came in 55 versus expected 52. So that kind of backed up, the strength in the jobs report. Remember, anything above, for ISM number, right? Anything above 50 is expansionary. So the number, 55 comes in much higher than expected, and also, the ISM number is also a leading indicator, right? We talk about, if you've took macro 101, you know that there are lagging indicators like GDP, there are some coincident indicators, and then there are some leading indicators, and ISM is one of them, as well as stock prices are also, a leading indicator. So that was really interesting, and of course, this has implications. The economics has implications, and of course, inflation data, which we'll get the next inflation data out, CPI, in a couple weeks. But did this really move Fed fund futures? Right. This is again short term. This is what the Fed controls. We heard from the Fed earlier this week. They said that they were going to, continue to monitor the situation. They said most likely we will get more interest rate hikes. So yes, of course, there's another 25 basis points right now that is being priced into the market for the March. We don't have another Fed meeting until March 22nd. So, that's about 6 weeks away. So we have some time before that. And then it could be that we do get another, we are now pricing, if you go out to June, which is a little bit of a change, maybe there will be another 25 basis points. And that's to be determined. That's a long way away before that happens. And we're going to get a lot more inflation data, a lot more economics that could kind of, really change change the forecast of that number, right, for the May and June meeting. All right, so that sums up kind of part of the day. The other thing I would say was, what happened with some of these earnings reports. I talked about this in yesterday's video, just how things change, like how quickly the sentiment changed, and where we were coming into the year. Everybody, in terms of, if you've turned on the TV, I don't want to say everybody, but 90% of the people were bearish, right? All those analysts analysts talking about, a horrible first half of the year. Maybe it gets better in the second half, right? So that changed very quickly, and it changed very quickly to all of a sudden, there's a lot more bullish sentiment on the tape. So, what happened with these names that reported earnings? Well, first of all, again, I want to just kind of take a step back and remember a couple of weeks ago, everybody was, I say everybody, it's wrong. The majority of what I heard was earnings are going to be a disaster. It turns out that I don't think earnings turned out to be a disaster. It really depends on the report. Some companies are, not doing well in this environment and bringing in their guidance and missing, analyst estimates. But there's a number of companies that are doing fairly well too, right? And that's some of what we're doing, at the Tribeca Trade Group is, we have a list now of earnings strength. And, I couldn't believe I was compiling that this morning, before the open today, just adding some names. And, I've got over 50 names over the last couple of weeks that have, either gapped up or just had really good reactions. I call it both the gap up and the earnings strength. And what I'm looking for is, positive, earnings, positive move on that day. For example, like an ELF, right? Which, did this, right? Broke out to new highs. So there's a lot of this going on right now in the market. So again, if you go to these names that reported yesterday, really this is going to be a kind of clue for, what we're going to see ahead. We talked about how Amazon, Google really rallied hard. This was in yesterday's video that I talked about it. And my take was that you should put the money in your pocket if you were long those names, right? For example, I played Amazon to the long side yesterday, and I closed that position out, right around this this Virgin point of control takeout. And here's, oops, let me just bring this up if I can. All right, so I've highlighted that order from yesterday. Again, I didn't get the tippy top, but I was able to, just for a one-day trade out of Amazon at 112, and I paid 106. Right. So again, I didn't get the very high for it. It did get up to close to 113, but look at it now. It retraced the whole move. And is this company going to be a leader for the next quarter? Probably not. Again, of course I don't have a crystal ball, but when you don't have a really good earnings report, unless the company comes out and changes their guidance somewhere between now and the next quarter, or they come out and say something differently, or they come out with a new product, right? It's probably going to be a tougher environment, right? Google, of course, this one also went up and achieved and took out that upside VPOC. I don't know about this one, and I'm not trading too much of the FANG stocks. They are interesting to look at because they are the biggest components of the indices, right? And then there's Apple, which actually ended up 2.4%, and kind of continued higher. And maybe this one does extend, and if it does, I see 167. I actually see that on multiple time frames, but I think that's interesting. Let's get back to the indices. But again, even if you're not trading the FANG names and Apple, it's important to kind of take a look at what these things are doing, because if you are looking at the S&P chart and the Qs every day, right, those are the top components of those names. So where did we, let's start with the S&P chart, right, just to kind of look at the big picture. Yes, we did take out that upside VPOC. Right now, the next thing that I usually do, or sometimes kind of just think about what could be, a little, what could be the next thing that happens, or what a lot of traders like to do, including myself, is do a scenario analysis. Okay, we've taken out a pretty big upside level, right, using volume at price, which is up here, right? That's an upside target. Well, what happens after that? Well, it could be a number of things. It could be that we digest in here and kind of back and fill, right? Notice that we're still above the 5-period moving average. So there's really no sell signal. We're still holding the trend. But what if it does, right? well, maybe we see a back test, right? And that would get you back down to like 4,066 in S&P futures, right? That would not be, in my opinion, a horrible thing. Why would that not be a horrible thing, right? Because it will shake out some of this super bullish sentiment that we've seen the last couple of days, right? Or this last couple of weeks, I should say, right? The market likes to do that, right? When everybody gets to one side of the boat, right, it begins to rock, right? And like I said in the beginning of the year, I think everybody was on that one side of being super bearish, right? Now you have everybody maybe crossing over and getting very bullish, and I think sentiment models, pick that up. So, a check back in here would not be a bad thing. And I think that's really interesting. I was talking about this again, and before I do this comparison, please, this is not, I'm not saying that this happens or anything like this happens. But if I could find the right, I may not be, let me go, let's see if it was the Qs, right? And it's, you know what, maybe I won't do that comparison because I can't find it. I thought it was S&P futures, so I'll skip it. I was going to do a comparison in this video, and maybe it was a different time. Okay, this was the comparison that I was referring to. Again, different time frame. It's not going to work. These things aren't going to work the same way. But take a look at this, right? So this was way back. I'm not sure. I think this was 2018. Or towards the end. It doesn't matter what period it is, but notice kind of a similar thing that happened here. We moved all the way up to this virgin point of control. We kind of hung around here. We eventually checked back, right? And you could see this was kind of a ugly looking candle for that day, but we kind of regrouped there. And then, if you looked at the right side of the chart, we headed up. Now, again, I'm not saying that it happens the exact same way, but again, just to kind of go through the scenario analysis, if we do come back here at some point and check back, the main thing will be is whether we hold and bounce on that 4066 level. All right, so that's one possible thing that could happen, and there's many other different scenarios that can arise from this. So you have to stay objective, stay nimble, and understand when it's time to be taking risk off if things really change. In terms of some other things that I was watching for the day, right? Of course, right? Looking at breadth again, and are there more new highs coming or more new lows, right? Are we seeing a divergence up here, right? Are we seeing new lows pick up? Well, look at in the S&P, for example, today, right? There's 16 new highs today. There was one new 52-week low. So, again, one day's not a trend, but this is what we've been seeing, right? What about NASDAQ, right? Was there a pickup today in new lows in the NASDAQ? No. I mean, I don't even have, we could spend an hour of this video, which I don't want to do that on Friday. But take a look at all the new highs in NASDAQ, right? Versus now there was some new lows, but again, there's not really much of a comparison. All right. And what about even if you look at the, the 4-week, right, for NASDAQ, right? Again, 20%, this is 4-week new highs. Right, so forget about the 52-week highs. Well, S&P wasn't as bullish, right? You had 10% making new 4-week highs, and there was 7% of the index making 4-week new lows. So again, that is interesting. And if you kind of go through these names, right, and I thought that this was kind of interesting too, going through the biggest movers, right, and starting with the names that got hit today, right, besides of course the FANG names, the Amazon, the Google, the Apple, they get the attention. But what was also interesting is Bill.com got smoked today, down 26%, right, and it brought down, as well as Team, which for some reason I don't see it on the list, but Team also was down quite a bit, and it did bring down some of these names. So when you see everything rally like we did this week, right, when you see everything rally like we did this week in terms of Qs were up 3.4%, IWM was up 4%, right? That's not how it's going to be generally. Is there will be, and I think especially once we get out of earnings season and we got a big chunk of earnings done this week, you will begin to kind of see some separation. Some areas are going to do better than others. So, a couple takeaways too. And again, for the week, you can see retail was up 7%. Regional banks were up 6.2%. Now they are into some short-term resistance, but I mean, that's pretty big weeks. And again, a lot of that is some earnings. Earnings drove some of that, as well as short covering, right? Which we know occurred as well. All right. So let's look at a couple things that really caught my eye today. Were something that we've been noticing for a while is that wow, it's actually that utilities did come back from the lows, but again, this looks like a weak chart to me, right? This is different than what we saw again last year on other times where we rallied. A lot of times it was with the low volatility equities, right? And these things are continuing to not look very good. Gold, which everybody seems to be, was the consensus trade to, or a consensus trade that you have to be in gold, right? I kept hearing this, whenever I would talk about something positive on Twitter, and Twitter is a funny place. Somebody, oh, you got to be in gold. You got to be in gold. Well, look at what gold did today. It got, first of all, it got rejected yesterday, and it got absolutely smoked today, right? So again, perhaps a bit of an overcrowded trade, right? And the dollar went up today. The dollar is at a very interesting level, which we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, and it is starting to turn the corner, right? Look at the weekly chart, right? It bounced right on that bottom of value for the year. We're using volume at price. So 27.31 support held, and it's bouncing a little bit, right? And I still have a small trade on, right, in the US dollar, which it hasn't really done much, but I'm long the, kind of like a lotto type ticket. I'm long the 28 calls. So, we'll see if that continues to move higher. You should see some areas of the market suffer a little bit with a stronger dollar, but alongside them, bonds made an interesting move today. We really haven't seen. I was just talking about this week that we've seen the volatility really die down in bonds. So was this the end of the world today to see bonds down 1.2%? No, they're not. They really haven't done anything over the last couple of weeks. In fact, the last couple of months, they've moved sideways. Yes, it did get rejected at the 200-day moving average twice this week, right? And once back here as well. But we're also not breaking down either. All right, we're just moving sideways. So I don't think there's anything really to get that excited about. Besides this, a decent move today, one day is not a trend, and there's not any change in the trend here. All right, so utilities acting weak, gold miners acting weak. What is, and I mentioned that XRT hit some resistance, right? So I would not own this. I would be taking profits into this 74.12 level. But if it could get above there, this is why we pay attention to resistance. Maybe there'll be something different that goes on here. Again, a lot of these moving averages are looking very different than the peaks that we saw in August, right? And that's the case with IWM as well, right? IWM just by a hair did manage to clear top of value, but that doesn't mean that this is going to go straight up. It just means that, hey, it got a little bit over resistance. But look at the difference in these moving averages from where we were in August, right? This moving average, which is the 50-period moving average, was sloping down. Now look at it. It's starting to kind of bottom, and some of these shorter term moving averages are all starting to curl up like this. So it looks like there's more momentum. And you see that with the moving averages, as well as if you use the RSI, right? The RSI is at a higher level too, which is actually a good thing. So that's, these things are moving in the right direction. So again, it doesn't mean that there won't be some backing and filling after, that pretty big candle for the week. But overall, like the trends are starting to kind of move and change to the upside. And this is what also has me pretty excited, is the semiconductor ETF, right? So this is XSD. I like this ETF over SMH because SMH is market cap weighted. So, Intel is going to be, because it's a bigger company, is going to be a bigger weight. This is equally weighted. Notice this has broken above the 2023 value area. It's one of my favorite markets, right? When you start to see the semiconductors lead like this, it's usually a pretty darn good thing, right? Another thing that we were talking about too is transports. Now, transports have some work to do, but they had a pretty big week, and we're seeing a lot of trucking type companies, break to new highs. And I was going to show, so one other thing that I think is interesting, right? And if we look at the performance, right, and I could bring up one of my spreadsheets over here, and to look at year to date, for example, the Dow's only up 2.3%, right? We've seen this big move out of, again, and a lot of it fueled by short covering with the Qs up 15%, but the market will continue to rotate around. So one of the areas that I'll be watching, and this didn't trigger today, so which is fine, it'll be something to watch for next week. But let's see if the diamonds can actually get out of this period of this consolidation here, and maybe break above 340, 340.54. So I'm not long the Dow, but I'll tell you, if it breaks that trend line and breaks out of value, I will be. And if it kind of decisively gets above here. All right, so many more charts to go over, but I want to keep it. I think this video is long enough. We'll be doing our homework over the weekend, sending some charts to members. Really, this is kind of was a little bit of my final thought in yesterday's video. Hey, there's going to be some great opportunities, I think, that are going to come. New market leadership. Again, if you're stuck in the FANG stocks, my thought was to be taking profits and on the move up in some of those names, because there are just many more exciting things going on, right? I spent an awful long time in 2022 talking about how leadership changes. It happens over time, as long as I've been doing this for, right? When I was very young, I heard about IBM and AT&T. Oh, those are the leaders. Those will always be the leaders. Well, that changed, right? And then, out of the dot-com days, right? Then it was Cisco, and it was, and it was things like Intel. Right? Those aren't the market leaders anymore. It changes, right? Every once in a while, a name could really be a leader for a long time, and we've seen that, especially with a name like Apple. But it does change over time, and the more that you could recognize some of these changes, or at least have someone to tell you when things are changing, that's important, because it does, right? For a long time, like, you couldn't tell anyone, right? Oh, I'm never selling IBM, or I'm never selling AT&T, right? We used to hear about the baby bells, right? I know some of you are not old enough to know about these things, but I'm telling you, it shifts, right? And you want to be able to find what the new leaders are going to be, and I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. So I'll leave it there, guys. Again, go to TribecaTradeGroup.com. Please, like the video as well if this is adding value to you, and sign up for my Substack. Right, we continue to kind of send out different posts about what names are breaking out on multiple time frames. I'm getting a lot of good feedback from people. People really seem to like that. Fresh breakouts. Right. And also, just like we were talking about with the semiconductors, right? We're seeing that all over the place in that group. So it's really interesting when that happens. Guys, have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday morning.